Okay, so on the screen, if you're starting and wanting to go along with the video, this is what you need to have ready. So for those of you who are using this as a video, pause your screen right now and get those ready for you. For those of you who are with me, uh, let me give a little explanation. The creasing on both sides, back and forward, I'm going to show that to you. It makes it handy for working with paper piecing. These are the tools I use when I'm paper piecing. A little mat. This is a finger creasing tool. If you have an iron set up next to you, that's even better. I use a little rotary cutter just because it's handy. And most of the time I use a ruler just for the 1/4 inch that's small like this. They do have 1/4 inch uh, paper piecing ruler at a 1/4. It's not, you don't have to have it specifically, but it does come in handy when you're working on the seams on the insides of your paper piece. For the outside paper piecing, I use this, so to get it trimmed up all around the edges. So, and I'll show you how to use this just to give you a little insight on it. When you start out this project, uh, you start out with your sheet, and there are a couple different ways to cut your sheet. I sit at night sometimes with this and just trim the outsides and up the center. To get even more accurate, you can use a rotary cutter with your ruler, but be careful when you're matching. Make sure you match the line outside. Don't put it right on top of the line. Match it to the outside. Give yourself just a little bit of room when you're actually cutting it with a rotary cutter. Otherwise, you end up cutting off the outer seam where you're going to trim that up at the end, like I did on this side versus this side. I did this really quick this morning. Or you can just use regular scissors. They are the most accurate. They do take the longest. But once you have your pieces cut out, then we fold our pieces. The reason I fold my pieces is for a couple of different helps. One is if you fold it, and we're going to fold the lines that are inside the seam, the outer seam. Once you fold it, when you use your closer stitching, it makes it quicker and easier to get your paper out of your finished product. And as you can see, I fold it not only one way, I fold it in both directions. The other reason I fold it is when I'm checking to see if my piece of fabric that I'm using fits, you can use this fold to check that. And I will show you physically when we get to the table where we're actually sewing it together. And those are the two main reasons I fold. And a lot of times what I do is I get all my pieces and I sit in front of the TV at night and I have a folding party. And it really helps a lot.
That's
So
something new to me. I like that.
it's very handy, very helpful. A lot of people don't do it because, they don't, it takes up time. But the whole idea to paper piecing is that, yes, it takes a little longer, but it's going to be one of the most accurate blocks you make. It's going to come out on the dot if you do it and have all of your seams match up properly with the line. All right, in this project, to figure out how wide to cut my pieces, I took my paper piece patterns, and this one only has two sides to it. We have two sides that go together, which also make four squares. And I will show that to you up here. So we start out with 8 pieces. They go together in blocks of 2, and then they go together in across here, and then 2 together this way to get a block that looks like this. And different paper piece patterns are different. A lot of people start out with their paper piece pattern of a big giant sheet and all these little pieces, and that's not the way to start out when you're um, trying to learn how to paper piece. You want to take and start out with a block that's easy to do. And even this one block is easy to do, but it just happens to make a larger block. So, um, so I measured across each of the pieces. I found the fattest piece, and this one was the fattest. And I added about 1/4 of an inch to it. And I came up with 3 inches because 3 inches is easy to see on my ruler. So 3 inches for your solid piece looking piece, 3 inches for your not so solid looking piece. And as you can see, I chose 2 colors that kind of went together and um, but are have a distinct difference. And then I chose a cream color background that also came with the look so that they all kind of go together. But cream, any kind of cream color background will do if you're sending it to me. 2 inches on the cream color background. And just to make sure I had enough fabric when I cut out the kit, I did 2 of each of these. So 3 inch, 3 inch, 2 inch, and 2 of each of them. So that's how I figured out how fat to make my pieces, the strips that I cut. There is another way, and I had, like I say, I have an advantage because I have EQ. So because some people don't like paper piecing in the packets, I also put in templates. Well, the templates can also be helpful if you're still going to paper piece. Then you can take and cut your templates out, and you can actually know how long the piece of fabric you have. So you can then make these pieces more manageable and cut these pieces into ones that are just a little bit bigger than the template, but are a size that is much more manageable. As I'm teaching today, I'm going to teach you how to do with the strips. I'm also going to teach you how to be non-wasteful or how to be wasteful with your fabric. That's kind of weird, but a lot of people say, I don't like doing paper piecing because it is wasteful. And I feel like that even though it is a little bit wasteful, it's well worth it because you're coming out with much more accurate piece. And I have mislaid my pattern. I went and tried to take it. Here it is. I tried to print this out so I could rotary cut strips that would go with this. And when I printed out the rotary cut from EQ, it tried to give me everything, but it was so complicated that it left out one of the pieces. It couldn't give me the instructions for that. but it gave me this with all the different angles. So I don't want to cut out all those angles. So I would have had to gone to a template if I didn't paper piece, but paper piecing makes it much easier. Okay, so I've showed you how to cut how to figure out the strips, how to cut out, how to fold. So we're going to move to actually taking and sewing and how to get started. I keep my tools handy right beside me. And I have my fabric lined up. And when I did yesterday to get these other 3 blocks done, I didn't worry about scraps. I put them aside and I ended up reusing the scraps in a different area of the block. So to start out, if you look at your paper piece, they have numbers on them. They have letters and numbers. Okay, the letters are in this block is not as important, but in other blocks, it gives you a way to put them together so that it fits together best. Even the A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, if once you get all of these blocks made, these individual ones, because in paper piecing, we can't do all of these pieces together. It had to break it up because you can only do the one line at a time, and it has to be in an order where it can go one after the other. That's why paper piecing breaks it up. But when you're putting all of the pieces that you have sewn together with the paper piece, if you go in the A, B, C, D, E, F, G order, a lot of those patterns are made to fit together better going in alphabetical order after that. So I have G and F, which go together. And it has numbers on it with the G. So here's number 1 piece right here. So that's the very first block I have to get, or piece I have to get on there. And there are 2 ways. I've adopted using stick glue. One of our friends, Iris, said she does it this way. And I thought, I'm going to give it a try. And I like it because pins get in the way. So I have this piece that I know is going to fit there. And at first, when I look at it, I'm going to try and get this piece to go on the fabric so that I don't waste too much. So matching up this corner over here is going to be the way I'm going to go. But first, I'm going to put a little stick glue on the inside of the seams of that piece. And then I'm going to line it up on my fabric.
Lynn, that's the background. That's the 2-inch strip that we're working on first.
Yes, the 2-inch strip.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's number 1. When I look on this side, it's the color for the 2-inch strip, which is the cream color. And if you look at the others, there's a dark strip and then there's white light colors. For those of you who have gotten, well, actually, even in the pieces you printed out on your printer. So it gives you a guide as to what color you're working on. So trying to think this through so I give you all of it becomes so ingrained in a person who does paper piecing. You might skip over easy things. But number one is the light strip, and I am lining it up on that light strip so that, oh, and I did miss something. Let me tell you, a lot of people think paper piecing is backwards, but what it really is this is a mirror image. And you know how we have fabric that has a right side and a wrong side? Well, the right side of this pattern is blank. The wrong side of this pattern has the lines on it. And the reason I say that is when you get done, this is going to have all the right side facing you, this blank side. And this side is going to have all the seams facing you, which is the wrong side of our sewing. So if you think of it in that way, it does give you more help to understand instead of thinking that this is backwards. So that's one little hint I have for those who are newbies. So if you look at what I did, I have the right side on the blank side, and the wrong side is to the printed side. So once I have that glued there, see I've got it glued, you can also pin it, but I would suggest you pin it on this wrong side so that it doesn't get in the way. But once I have it either pinned or glued, I'm then going to trim this piece of fabric back here so that it is the exact size that I need for this piece of fabric. The way I do that, because I've folded this, is I fold back the paper where the next seam is going to be. And the next seam is going to be where 1 and 2 is. So I'm folding back this way first. So then I take my ruler, and here's where this little handy dandy ruler comes in helpful. It has a little groove right here. And the groove fits right onto the seam and won't let you go any further. Then I take my rotary cutter and I trim that side away. Now I've got an exact 1/4 inch from the seam line for the cream colored fabric. Well, I'm going to go one step further because I want to get all of this bulky fabric out of the way. So I'm going to make it trimmed on the other side as well. Again, I'm going to use this ruler, but you can also use this ruler. Line up your 1/4 inch with the edge of the paper and trim away. So now all I see on the front is a little bit of fabric over here and a little bit of fabric over here. I can trim those too, but they're not that bulky. I can just leave them for now. So when you look on this side, you have this cream colored fabric trimmed with a 1/4 inch on this side and a 1/4 inch on this side. So when you put the next piece on, it receives that 1/4 inch. All right. Now I know that's hard to understand, but as you watch, you'll see. Looking at my paper piece, because I have put all of the colors on here, I know that the next fabric is going to be the light color, not the cream, but the light color. And this is the dark fabric. So I'm going to take my light color fabric. And I'm going to bend back where that seam is so that I know that's what I'm going to be attaching this piece to. Let me get y'all closer. What I'm going to do is have my next piece of fabric facing up. And for those of you who got kits, I designed these so that you're using the side of the strips to match your seams to. It just made it easier. So you're never going to match it to the top edge. You're always going to match it to the side. And a lot of people tell you to do it this way. You take this, you put this on here, you pin it in the back, you flip it over. Okay, the easier way is this. Fold your next seam over like, oh, I'm not getting you in. Like I showed you just a minute ago. Match it to the side of the fabric. Now, when you're looking at the folded fabric or the folded paper, you can see this is your next patch that you're filling in. And because I have it folded back like this, I know I have enough fabric right here to receive that. And it's not going to be a problem when I sew this and then open up my seam. So this folding gives you an indicator right there. You can see I've got a more than a 1/4 of an inch area over here for the 1/4 inch seam. I've got this area is, and I'm looking at the back fabric as I'm talking to you about this. So by looking at it, you know you have enough fabric back here to sew that seam and open it up. And that's important as you go along for those of you who are new. So once I get that seam lined up like that, I open it up and I just come right over to my machine. And I sew on that line that is your seam line. I try and start from the inside and put my needle down in the line on that end.
You have the needle position in the center,
Yes,
so it's not to the left or the right. It's right down the middle.
it's not at the edge of the pattern. It's in the center of the pattern, wherever that line meets a second line.
Got it.
So we're sewing the line between number 1 and number 2.
What stitch length do you use, Lynn?
There we go. Thank you. So when I do my stitch length, I change it. Mine starts at 2.4. I don't know how y'all's numbers go, but I go all the way down to 1.5.
Okay.
So I'm sorry if your numbers are different than what's on my machine. I've never used too many machines, so that's what I do. I go from 2.4 down to 1.5. Then sew the line. So all the way to the edge. If this went to another line, oh, and I did forget, I backstitch at the beginning when I'm on the inside. When I go onto the outside, I don't worry about the stitch. I just let it go. I don't have to backstitch out there. So let me clip this and show it to you. So on this inside, I take one back stitch or two back stitches. And then you start to the on this line where the two meet, if you can. If you don't, that little back stitch will take care of it. And then I sew all the way to the outside, and I don't back stitch out here. I just leave it. You can if you want to. And you can see I got most of it on that line. As long as it's close to the line, you're doing pretty good. It is more important to have these out here match up with where you've stitched on, because these are going to be attached to other pieces, but a little tiny bit is negligible. So on the other side, you have the two fabrics facing each other. You're going to open this up, and there's your stitch line right there, your seam line. Then you're either going to take it to an iron or you're going to finger press it. And because I'm with you right here, I'm just going to finger press. Do a good job of finger pressing. Make sure that it creases. Now we're going to prep for the next piece. And the way we prep for the next piece is we bring in our mat. We turn it over to the wrong side because that's where we're going to trim. And we're going to have to do 2 cuts on this one. We're going to have to get rid of the bulk, trim the outside right here. And I try to trim just to the outside of this little dotted line on my pieces. If you want to put your ruler right on the line, as long as you're consistent, trim it the same way. And then those little dotted lines will, they could go away, they could stay. I think they stay on mine. And then I just trim it straight on that edge. And put this away for later. Now, this next line that you're going to be sewing on is between 2 and 3. It's this one. So you need to prepare that seam right there. You have to take and fold back on that between 2 and 3. And you can see I need to trim this off. This is pretty good from the last time we did. So if you like using your add a quarter, use your add a quarter. If you don't want to play with getting an add a quarter, use your regular ruler on the edge of the paper. Now I have that seam ready for the next piece. So my next piece is a dark. I'm going to be using the dark fabric. And this first one I'm teaching you with whole pieces, so you get the idea of what we're doing for paper piecing. So I put my cutting mat aside. I take my fabric and lay it face up. You want to make sure you do that right, because yesterday I sewed a whole chain link of these with the wrong side up. It was really fun taking all those out. So here's between the 2 and the 3. I'm folding it back. I've got my nice seam there. And I'm going to match it up to the side. And I match it pretty close to the edge because, like I said, I don't want to waste too much fabric. So I've got my seams, my 2 edges matched up. I open it back up again. I go back over to my sewing machine, and this line goes all the way from one side to the other side. So I sew that straight.
Lynn, did you use glue again there or no? Just the first time?
No, just the first time to hold it onto the pattern so that I could trim everything. Because
Okay.
once you start doing these, now you have the anchor of the stitches.
Right.
So you don't
Okay.
have to use glue.
Thank you.
This gets you really good at learning where your needle goes down so that you get it right on the line. And I don't backstitch on the outer seams because they're going to get tucked in under the other pieces. So now I have this line right here between the 2 and the 3 stitched all the way down. When I open it up on the other side, it covers over the whole area. Uh-oh, I didn't do it right. Look there. When I messed up because I didn't check ahead of time. So I am going to have to rip this whole thing out, but I'm not going to do that on your time. So be patient with me for a minute. And if you ever do mess up like that, unstitch from the fabric side. Don't unstitch from the paper side. It'll save your paper. The other thing you can do is you can put Scotch tape over top your paper should it start to pull apart so that you can reuse it and sew right through the Scotch tape. So the only piece that you start with facing down is your first piece. See, I start it facing down. All the other pieces you start facing up. And when you're putting them together, I would suggest you take the 4 that are alike and do them all at once. And the other 4 that are alike, do them second. Because if you switch back and forth, then you might confuse yourself with what pieces of fabric go where. And that's no fun when you put the wrong piece of fabric in the wrong spot. Because again, you have to take them out. So you can use this add a quarter on the edges, but you got to line through there. There's nothing to hook onto. So you have to line it up with the black line that's in there. That's one of the reasons I started using the other ruler, because the add a quarter works great on the inside, but when you're doing the outside, you got to switch back and forth. All right, we're back. So one of the things you can do to make sure that a piece, like I've got a piece right here, that might not be long enough. So I'm just going to check it on the outside. It is long enough to fit there. And what I didn't do the last time was I folded it over and I lined it up right up against this edge. And when I looked at it, I should have said, oh, look there, there's not going to be enough. Can you see there's not going to be enough to cover this area when I have it folded. So that's why it's good to fold these and check them as you're going. So I needed to move this down so that that whole edge right there is covered too. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, since I watched you the first time, I did exactly what you did and just on
I'm
fixed line.
so sorry. Oh no.
No, that's better. It's better to do it now than way later.
It was a good
So-
learning.
Yeah, I'm
you.
so
Yeah.
sorry. I messed up. Y'all messed
No,
up with
it's
me.
good. It's good.
So that's why the folding part helps. But you also have to remember to check it before you move along. So now I know, because I'm looking at this whole piece right here, that it covering this back piece. Now I can sew it with confidence.
You may have said this, but do you start on the dotted line sewing or on the solid line?
When it's an outside to an outside like this, I sew all the way to the dotted line.
Okay.
So I'll show you when I get this off.
Because some of mine, when I try to turn it to fold it to trim,
Yeah.
those stitches are hanging up
Yeah.
for me.
And what I do is I break that little stitch right there. Because to me, when you do it like this, where you've done it from a solid line, a dotted line all the way to the dotted line over here, you're giving it more reinforcement. So when you're looking at this other line that I sewed, where are you? There you are. When you're looking at this other line that I sewed, I started on the line over here, but I stitched all the way past to this line up here, only because I think it gives better reinforcement. You could stop if you're uncomfortable doing that. You can stop here and backstitch. Now, some paper piecing groups, they don't teach you to take and backstitch. They think if you go to this line and then this catches over top of that, but then you got to be making sure all of your tails get caught under the other stitching. And so I'm just more comfortable with just a little back stitch here and a little back stitch here, or a back stitch here and go over top of this line right here. Does that help? And
Thanks.
I-
I was
yeah.
muted. I was talking to you. But I was muted.
Well, and I'll show you down the line. When I get down here, I have to break one of those stitches, and it doesn't make much of a difference when you just break a little bit open. So now I'm back to having a good piece here, and I'm going to finger press it or iron it. Like I said, ironing is much better. And if you look at my system right here, let me get you, see if I can get you focused better. Bless you.
Thank you.
My system right here, I have my iron over there so that I can push my table over to the iron and just go back and forth when I'm doing this, and have my my cutting over on this side. So I set it up, so cut, iron, set it up, so cut, iron. But Yeah, I'm going to show you in a picture at the end how I did chain piece them yesterday. But like I said, it doesn't save as much fabric. So doing them one at a time like this is, but you can do one, you could do this first A and B, and then the second one and the third one and the fourth one, and then go back and do this, and then, so that you can continue to work on them, but cutting them apart like this saves the fabric. All right. So back to the basic parts of paper piecing. Now I've got my number 2 and number 3 sewn, and I have to trim it up and get it ready for the next one. So again, I have to trim here. And this is why I say try not to leave too much hanging over, because I left a lot hanging over yesterday and I had to kind of go into it like this so that I could cut the paper and not have to deal with paper hanging off. And you can see I'm trimming that little tiny piece of paper off the edge when I make this trim. That way you don't have to be as accurate when you cut your patterns out too, because that can get tedious. And then here's number 3 and number 4. So I'm going to bend back where number 3 and number 4 meet, and I'm going to trim off 1/4 of an inch away from the paper. And then, because this went off on this side, might as well just trim this off too. You can leave that hanging if you wanted to. You could trim all the outsides at the end if you wanted to, but it just makes it easier for matching up your next piece if you do trim them all. So my next piece is going to be, again, the light color, which is this one. For those of you who've got kits, there's a red one that is kind of like this. There's a yellow one that's kind of like this. And the yellow, the solid yellow is the gold, and of cream is the cream. So I'm going to bend this back so I expose the next seam I'm going to sew. I'm going to put face up my next piece I'm going to sew onto. I'm going to match it so that my next piece, and here's another nifty thing you can do. I want to see that next piece. I'm not sure where it is. Well, look, if you bend back this next, the one that's going to be the last piece, you can see that outline. So this block, that's the next block or the next piece of pattern, covers over the back side. So I'm checking that each time now because I don't want to mess up. And then fold it back over. And usually I do this right in front of my sewing area. Usually I'm right here doing this part so that it's easy to just bring it right to your sewing machine and sew it. I'm going to start all the way by the dotted line on this one because it's edge to edge, and sew that line. Now, when I open it up, it covers over that next piece. My finger press out. You can see this gets repetitive, and you just keep going until you get the whole thing covered up. I trim. And I trim. I'm folding back. Now here's, I think it was Janet that asked about it. Here's where this little piece right here is stuck. So when I'm trying to fold that back, it's not doing. Just rip it just up, just to the seam line. Then it'll fold back easy. And that's where the next one's going to be. So I'm going to trim that 1/4 inch away from the paper. And that pretty much takes care of the trimming on that one. And the next piece is going to be the cream color. So this next piece,
Wait a minute.
between number 4 and number 5,
Oh, I did cream just there because it looked the same as the G2.
nope, it
Is
was
that wrong?
supposed to be, yeah, it's supposed to be. And that's where you also should have your pattern out. So you can kind of look it over. It's supposed to be this color, Deirdre.
Okay, well, I guess I'm ripping again.
Sorry.
That's
Well, you know,
okay.
I had mine laid out with that same mistake, but I hadn't started sewing yet. So I was able to change it before I sewed.
Well, Carmen,
The difficulty I'm having when I'm putting these kits together is I can't put the actual fabric on there because we're using more than one type of fabric. And so I have to give it a color scheme. And on the email I sent out yesterday or the other day, it had the color scheme information on it.
you absolutely did, yes. And I just
Yeah.
made a mistake.
Yes, ma'am.
Not your fault.
So as of right now, you started out with the cream, you
Yeah.
went to the light color, the next one is the dark, and then
Yeah.
back to the light color, and now we're going to
Okay.
finish it off with the cream.
I'll be catching up with you in a few minutes.
That's fine. And I'm going to give you a hint on this last piece. This last piece and both the cream colors on all the two different patterns. Okay, so when I say 2 different patterns, each block is made up of 2 different sides. They have just a different setup to them so that they go through. So these 2 creams and these 2 creams are the same size. So when you're going through and putting them in your block, you're going to be able to alternate back and forth with the angles because the angles are the same. So I'm putting it in this direction because it's going to work that way. See, when I fold it back, it's going to cover up that whole area. I'm sorry, I'm really striking out this month.
All right, you gave me time to catch up. I appreciate it.
Plus,
All
it'll
right.
help us not make the same mistake.
That's true. So like I said, I've done a bunch of these, not had a problem with it. But so there, now what I'm going to do this time so that I get another straight edge is I'm going to cut this straight across the top, matching up to the tip. That way I'll have a straight edge for the next one. And then I'm going to trim the 2 sides. Oh, and I've got another little tip for you too. Hang on a second and I'll show you. So because I had salvage area at the end of this piece, I started in a little bit further. So I have a big giant seam right there. See how one side's a whole lot different than the other? Well, if you bend back both your fabric and that, you can then match up to your edge of your paper and trim that so that you have a proper seam. And after I get this flattened out, I do trim these little button sides. They do help when matching up this pattern, but I do it dangerously. I like to live life on the edge. So I put my rotary cutter right up against the edge of it and press down and rock back and forth. And then I look to make sure that all my edges are clean. And look, that one side is not clean. So I'm going to clean it up. And when you're done, you should have all of the edges cleaned up. And then on the other side, all of the paper should be covered.
Like that.
So then that piece is done, and set it aside because you have to work on the other side of it. You guys want me to take you through the other side so we get it going? Or
I
can I
would like
start
to.
with, yes? Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. So first, make sure you identify your fabric as to what goes where.
You're so funny.
Cream color. I do it too. I do it too. That's why
I wrote on my pattern piece so I wouldn't get mixed up.
that's good. That's good. And the lighter color goes in the center here and the darker color goes on the outsides here. And then here's your two creams. So the first piece, you start with the fabric up.
Which letter are we doing? I'm sorry, I'm confused.
We're doing, I have F. If you want to do the same one, I have F. And I'm going to face it so that the corner goes in the corner over here. Put my stick glue on. And when I put the stick glue on, I try and stay on the inside of all the seam lines. Put it down, make it adhere. I always trim the side that has the big tail first, just to make it easy. So trim 1/4 of an inch away from your paper. And I'm going to give you a little, I always forget to put this back on my rotary cutter. Don't forget to do that because you can cut yourself really bad. Don't ask me how I know. And then trim up the other side. Now your first piece is in place. And when we look at it, piece number 2 is a dark piece. So I grab a piece of dark. And I have this piece. I don't know if it's going to fit. So I'm going to see. I put the right side up and I check it. Oh, looks like it's going to fit. So I fold where my next seam line's going to be. There's my seam that I'm using from the number 1 side. Oh, but I forgot. Which way does it go? All right. Best way to figure it out. That's going to go there. I'm going to just lay it there. I'm going to turn my whole thing over and I'm going to fold it back where the seam is. And then I'm going to line it up. Did y'all see that?
Sort of.
Sorta. I'll do it again. I don't know if this piece fits. Let me get y'all back a little. Well, I guess you're far back as you can get. I'm going to lay it here just to see if I have enough. It's big enough. And because I make sure I have a 1/4 of an inch here, I can match it up to this line over here even, because that's a hard seam. Yes, you always stitch it in the numeric order. So when I'm looking at this, F1 and F2, this is the line that I'm going to stitch. So I check to see if it works. If it does, right there and then I flip it over so that I know that I'm getting it in the right place. I'm going to get the right side to the right side. Then I don't try and line it up there. I just flip the whole thing over. I fold that back where number 2 goes over top of number 1. Then I match up my seam lines right where they are. And I check to see. Okay, so when you're looking at it again, here's that line right there. Easier to see the lines without the light. Here's the line right here for this piece. And the line right here, and you can see some hanging over there, and I've got it matched up to the edge, so it's going to be just right. Then I open it up and I take it to my sewing machine and I sew it. And back stitch. Trim. And there I've got between 1 and 2 done. Open up that seam. Fits perfect. So there I used a scrap and I knew that the scrap would work.
Okay.
And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of people want to use their scraps to do some paper piecing. And I've heard so many war stories of, yeah, people, they gave me this paper piecing pattern and they said, it's really easy. This is the way you do it. And then they gave me a bunch of scraps and I tried to use my scraps and I kept getting the wrong size pieces and I was getting frustrated with it. And because that's what happened to me. So I developed this folding to double check to make sure scraps would work. and make it an easy and quick way to figure out whether they would or not. So I wanted to give you all that. And as you can see, when I do them, it's just like matching two pieces of fabric together. So it's not really looking at it backwards, it's matching your seams to your seams. All right, and then trim up this side. Are you still with me, Deirdre? So I'm making the next seam ready to match up.
Sorry, I got a phone call.
And my next piece of fabric is going to be the lighter fabric.
Yes, ma'am. I got that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at this piece. Will it match and be big enough? Actually, it will. Look at that. So right away, I just turn it over and then turn the whole thing over and match my seams up. Open up my paper and take it to the machine. And sew on the line. Open up your fabric. It covers the whole area. Press. Flip to the wrong side and trim. Holding back between number 3 and 4. Trim 1/4 inch away from the paper. You're ready for number 5. Oh, no, number 4, excuse me. And number 4 is a dark fabric. So again, I'm playing with scraps so you guys can get used to scraps. Because you'll have pieces left over and you'll go, well, maybe I could use them. And this pattern lends to having scraps that you can use the second time. So right there, that's perfect. I'll flip it over right there. So I know that I've got the right side that I want. Flip the whole thing to the wrong side and match up my seams. Check to make sure it's going to cover. Here's my piece right there that has to cover this whole piece right here. Okay, so this little point, I can't see through the fabric and through everything. So what I'm going to do is just, here's another way you can do it. When you flip it over this way, folded fabric, folded paper, fold it on the line this way. Do y'all see that? I've got the wrong side down, the right side up, and I can actually fold it on the seam line right here and see that I've got enough area to cover the seam here and through here. So I know for sure that I've got enough there. If I didn't like how much, little bit right there might not be 1/4 of an inch, I'm going to adjust it just a little bit in a direction that I know it will. Make everything flat. Try again. And look there. Now I have more than enough. Now, flip it back over and sew it. And like I said, the only reason I'm going over those type of things is because they frustrated me for the longest time till I started folding my paper like this so that I could check it.
Another thing I like to do, especially is to make it easy, is to use fabrics like solids or batiks that don't have a wrong side and a wrong side, a wrong side and
Yeah.
right side.
Yeah.
Because then it doesn't matter if you accidentally put it on the wrong side, it's still gonna be right.
Yep. The other nice thing about that too is sometimes the piece will fit if you had the right side up, but it was if you had the wrong side up, the piece would fit in that space because you
Mhm.
know you have different. Well, if you have fabric like that, Carmen, then it doesn't matter. You can just flip it over and use it.
Yeah. Woven fabrics work too. Anything that's the same on the front and the back.
Trim it up. Okay, I have to break that little right there so that it'll fold back easy. No biggie. And see, I did it again. Bad me, bad me. Things bother me. This corner's bothering me. All right, now we're to the tan again.
Right, we're to the background again, right?
Yes, the cream color.
Okay.
So you can also, you know, I know in traditional quilting, we're always supposed to have the stretch factor in the right direction. But with paper piecing, since you leave it on paper, it doesn't hurt it to try and do it where it's not got that stretch factor properly. So if you tilt the fabric a little bit, it doesn't matter. And see, here's that. I did it this way so I could see where if it was going to work. I need to move it just a little bit this direction. So that's going to work. So flip it over.
Did mine
And
wrong
I'm
again.
going to, uh-oh,
Okay, not your fault. Totally mine.
so on the line. And the first thing I'm going to do before I press it back is I'm going to trim that seam because I left that big hunk. Then I'm going to press it back. And then trim. And here's another little tip. If you accidentally waver and you clip some of your, get into your seam, adjust yourself and go back, because since you have the whole thing here, you can just match up around it. All right, now I'm going to trim up the edges that I didn't trim before. Okay, so I have piece number 2. All trimmed up. And I try to trim them straight on the edges. Even like, see this little bit of edge right here where it's not quite straight? I'm going to go back and try and make sure that that gets straight. It helps when you're putting your big pieces together to have all of those as close as you can. Because these two are now going to go together. Oh, nope, those two aren't. Look at that. I know why the other one didn't work with the edge, because I had a pattern that was too big. I've been printing these patterns off, so that's why it didn't work. For y'all, it's going to work because I got the right pattern for y'all. Okay, so now I have these two that need to go together, and I have not removed the paper from the back. I like to leave the paper on the back until I'm totally done. I do take paper out where it's bulky when I'm doing paper piecing. This specific pattern does not get bulky, but if you're putting a whole bunch of them together and it's getting hard for you to manipulate, you can take the center pieces out and leave the edges in, so you still have your seam allowances. But I try and leave all the paper in until my project is totally done, with the exception of what I'm going to show you next. So now I need to put these two pieces together. Well, they made these nice little points for you for a reason. I take my pin and I put it in that point on this side. And then I take another pin, try and make sure they're semi-straight pins. I know mine are not. A lot of them. And I put it in this point on this side. All right. So I'm going to try and pull back this green fabric so that I can see the point where it's going through. And I wiggle that pin around because I want one side to be able to see the hole. So you can't see it, but if I hold this up to my light, there's a hole right there, and I can actually see it when I turn it this way. I take this one, this pin on this side, and this pin on this side, and I put it right through the hole. So I'm getting it. Each one of them is in there. And I do the same thing on this side. Through the point. Through the point. With the fabric up against it. Try and make sure the fabric's in the right place before you do this. You know that it matches up with the edges. And y'all might think this a little bit overboard, but it makes everything match up proper. So now I have these two corners matched up. And this is what I've been doing lately. Make sure they're nice and matched up and you got them straight. You want to have your pin straight down through so that it's nice and straight.
Lynn, you don't do the third point?
Nope.
Okay.
I get them all straightened up. I put my clips on. I move it away from where I'm starting. And I actually take the other pin out while I'm pinching this one. Pull the pin out and I go to my machine. And I put my needle right through the point and I take a back stitch. And then I start. Try really hard to stay on the line.
Are you stitching the long line first?
Yes,
Okay.
in between the two pins I put.
Right. Okay.
And when I get to the other end, I pinch my two ends together. I take my last clip out and I make sure that they stay put with my fingers. And this has been working for me for this pattern. You can see everything matches up. Now, to make this less bulky, I take this piece of paper out. Just what's beyond where the two seams go together. On both sides. And I just do like you do with perforated paper. I just run my fingernail over it and it comes right off. And if you look on the other side, I got pretty close on the other side to the line. I wasn't exactly on it. As long as what you did looks right on the inside, so you always need to take a peek at it before you do this part, then you're good. So, and because there are six pieces coming together in the center, I didn't open them all on this one, but I'm opening all of the themes on the ones I'm doing now.
Say that again.
Because I have a center point that has six pieces that come together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm opening up the themes on the back.
Oh,
And giving them a good press. So once you get your 4 squares together, and you can see I open them up, I still have the paper on. Then you just put them together. It's not as important to put your points together, although if you feel more comfortable, you can try to do that. But you should be able to just match them up and do them. And to be honest, it doesn't matter which square's in which corner, they're all the same. Okay, we're going to learn how to chain piece. I originally said I'd show you a picture, but I think watching is better than looking at a picture. So I'm trying to save fabric in this next round because I have a limited amount of this fabric. So I went ahead and I cut out my pieces so that they're already similar in size to what I'm going to be putting them on. Now, I've already put this first number 1 and number 2 on. Here's number 3. And I'm going to show you how to chain piece. Just like we did in the past, we make sure that it's going to fit on there and that I know exactly where I'm going from to. I need to try and make sure that it fits where I'm going to go. And you can see it covers everything. So I'm just going to do like I've been doing, flip it right there. Turn it over. Match my themes. Now, this one is easy to chain piece because it's going from an outer piece to an outer piece. When you do the inner ones, you have to move things out of the way just a little bit more. It does waste a little bit more thread, but that's okay. So now I go to my machine and I sew my first one all the way down the line, trying to stay on the line. And pretty much since all of these are cut the same way, I now have an example to look at. And match the next one up. So when I'm getting over here, I'm still double checking. See, that goes to that outer edge and it's covering everything up. I could pull it a little bit this way just to make sure. So I moved the bottom back a little bit. Now for sure I got enough there. My seams are lined up. Open up. Push this back out of the way. Start my next one. And there, those two are chain pieced. Just like regular chain piecing here, I clip the threads in between. So I'm going to put you on hold while I get the rest of these pieces put together because I want to show you how to pin them together with pins. Okay, I have my pins in both sides, like I showed you earlier, where you put the pin through the point on both ends of the longest line, because that's the line we're going to sew. Now, I want to show you how you can pin instead of using clips. I like using clips. I've just started doing that. It works out pretty good for this specific one, but if you've got a lot of places where you need to combine seams where they match up, then you might want to use pins. So I'm going to show you right here on this side. We have two, there's the cream color and the cream color. They need to match. So I'm going to visually match them up from the outside. And instead of going through the paper, because I find the paper slips things around, I'm going to go just inside the paper. And I'm going to catch the fabric like I would if I wasn't using paper piecing. And catch the other side. I can feel it with my finger on just on the other side of the paper. Go down and then go through the paper to hold it. So I went through the fabric first, and then I end it in the paper down below. And just like we did with the clips, I'm going to get these two really well. And then I'm going to go through inside the paper, catch the fabric, then catch the paper. And that way on the outside, you know that your line's going to stay even with the material on the inside. Then you can remove this pin. Go back to the other side. You go pinching together, making sure that your end one is straight. Go just inside the paper, catch the fabric, then go through the paper. And maybe one more in the middle here. I lined them up by just making sure the paper is lined up. Because if you have this trimmed and this trimmed at the same 1/4 inch, it's just like lining up 2 pieces of fabric. Then just inside the paper, catch the fabric, then go through the paper. And there you go. You have 4 pins. That are just inside the fabric, inside the paper, catching the fabric. Then you can bring it to your machine and sew on the line. With pins, they're a little more bulky, so you kind of got to get it started. Pull your pins out as you come to them. And when you come back and look at what you've done, make sure things are lined up. Look there, that's pretty good. And like you did on the other one, you remove this paper in the seam and then iron it open. So I just thought you guys needed to know how to do pins because some people don't have clips. And some people aren't comfortable with clips. I like using pins more than clips, but I'm getting better at them. So there's that little bit.